Head and hands need a mediator. The mediator between head and hands must be the heart. Welcome to the Mind Your Movies podcast. This is episode 8 on Nosferatu. We're talking Nosferatu and Metropolis. My name is Shane.
And I'm Ryan.
And we're the Mind Your Movies podcast.
Mind Your Movies podcast. Here we are.
So spoiler warning if you have not seen Nosferatu, the original 1922 movie, or Metropolis, you've had 95 years to watch each one. Get on it.
It's about time, guys. Catch up.
Yeah, right. But and also next week we're doing Robert Eggers' Nosferatu, so we're excited for that.
Quick reminder, this is our public domain episode, so if you're following along, we draw those genres out of the cup every episode, so we picked these ones off of the genre public domain. Part of that, hopefully these were easy for you guys to find if you're following along with us. We'll talk about some of that later, but just wanted to throw that in there.
Yeah, so easy to find, it's actually difficult sometimes.
That's right.
But yeah, before we get into it, we're going to do what we've watched recently. And Ryan, if you wanted to start us off.
Sure. Let's see. So I guess I should go back. Okay, there we go. So I've watched a bunch of, it's the holidays here, so I've watched a bunch of bad Christmas movies. But I watched the Lorax recently, the original 1972 Lorax, which way better than I remembered, which was cool. I remember I'd seen it when I was like a kid, but I think now I have a little more context in like my actual life to acknowledge some of the stuff that's going on in that movie. It's nice, it's short, it's fun, the animation's cool. Yeah, love it.
Nice. Well, I'm gonna come in maybe a little hot with a hot take. This is what we've watched recently. I watched a very underrated movie, an unfairly maligned movie, Joker Folie à Deux. This movie was great.
Most controversial pick for the year.
I can't believe. This movie comes out, it gets shit on. No one sees it. Total bomb. Everyone hates it. The pitchforks are out for Joker Folie à Deux. I watch it. I think it was just as good as the original. Wow. I really do. It was great. It was. I thought it was fantastic. Joaquin and Lady Gaga were great. I thought the story was really good. I thought it was sad. It was definitely a lot sadder and darker than most superhero movies, but I feel like that so was the first one, Yeah. And I thought also like Brendan Gleeson was really good, and Catherine Keener is in it, Steve Coogan, and also the Lee Gill, who was the little person from the first one. He returns and he gives a great performance too. I was like, this movie's great. So anyway, I'm a Joker 2 defender, and I will stand by it.
I don't know if I mentioned this, but when I saw Joker 2, I saw it in theaters with a few people, and I knew like it was supposed to be kind of bad. I didn't really care much about it. At first, obviously, I was excited about it, but I never really like did a lot of investigating into like what the movie was going to be about. And so I'm watching the movie, and like the second song comes on, and then I was like, all right, that's interesting. And then like the third song comes on, and I turn over to my friend and I'm like, did you know there was going to be this much music in it? And apparently it was a musical, and I didn't know that going into it, which was a strange experience, I think. Not expecting that. But
yeah, that's fair. I thought the musical segments worked. Like it was all, that's what a musical is. It's like just a expression of the characters' like inner feelings usually, and that's pretty much what they were. And also they're crazy people, so if they start singing in real life, that also is like, all right, well,
there you
go. It's a mental asylum, right? Mental hospital. But yeah, I thought it was really good. Nice. So overall, I don't know. I don't know why people had such disdain for the movie. It seemed like people just hated it.
Yeah. I definitely don't. I don't think I liked it, but I don't think I hated it, but I don't think I liked it. I think part of that was like expectations, and again, I went in like expecting a lot because of the first. I'm glad you thought it was just as good, but I think the music aspects kind of threw me off just because I wasn't expecting them. Um, and yeah, I don't know. I don't really remember too much, but I remember coming out not super impressed. But
Yeah, I mean, it was months ago when you saw it, so I know it's not
yeah,
like super fresh in your mind. So I'm not trying to get like have you defend everyone who doesn't like the movie or whatever.
no, this is gonna be a
But
debate
I
right
do,
now.
yeah, right. But I do feel like there was like a hive mind of hatred for this movie, and I feel like that does happen where
Oh
there
yeah,
will be like these movies that come out, and just for some reason, everyone is shitting on it, whether they've seen it or not, or what like just for whatever reason, people want to dogpile on a certain. I mean, it's not just movies. That's just like part of the internet. To be honest, it's just kind of
yeah,
a negative side of human nature, I guess, of dogpiling on things, maybe to make yourself feel better. You're like, let's just shit on this thing. But
yeah.
but anyway, I thought it was very good, and I enjoyed it. And also,
Okay.
I thought it was interesting. The movie came out before Luigi Mangione allegedly shot the United Healthcare CEO. I know someone shot him, but I don't know if it was him. But uh, after that, it kind of put everything in a slightly different context, and I thought that was interesting social context for the movie. That maybe if it had come out a month later, maybe people have maybe the discussions around it are totally different.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Maybe even if that happens, they push it back and they try to avoid it, because I know that happened with like Columbine, like some movies where just they're like, all right, we're going to release this next year because of this controversy and the media and all that.
Yeah, totally. Um, Looking back, also, I decided, you know what? I looked back at my review for Joker. Um, I pretty much said the same anecdote about not knowing it was musical, and I said, "Why is it a musical?" So I guess the music really didn't hit for me, but that probably was a good bit of that was not expecting there to be music in the movie.
Yeah, that is kind of tough to like midway, like you just think you're watching a regular movie and then it just turns out to
Yeah,
be a musical kind of out of the blue.
yeah. The same thing happened with Wicked. No, I actually that was me. I'm just kidding, but um, but speaking of, I did see I saw Wicked recently. Um, it feels like forever ago, but yeah, it was good. I think I don't think I'm in like the train of people that are like maybe in the fandom for Wicked, but I did think it was a pretty good movie. I enjoyed it quite a bit.
Nice,
Have
good.
you seen Wicked? I think you
No,
have.
didn't get around to it. Yeah, I also watched a bunch of movies, like, so I'm just gonna pick and choose a little bit.
Yeah,
I
same.
mean, hey, if people want to stalk our movie watching, they can just go to our letterboxd and look at our
That's right.
diary and see everything we watched. But another recent movie that I watched was Juror Number Two on Max. Clint Eastwood, maybe his final film, and it was a good movie. I think it was very good for a large chunk of it, but the ending, like the last 10 minutes maybe, like were a slight disappointment for me. Um, it wasn't bad. It wasn't like terrible or anything. It didn't ruin the movie, but I just thought it kind of didn't align with the way the characters were set up throughout the rest of the movie, like some of the character actions at the end. Um,
Interesting.
but overall, still, I thought it was a really good movie, and it's a shame it got kind of just buried by Warner Brothers, and then they just threw it on streaming, and they barely put it in any theaters. Like Clint Eastwood movies generally are pretty. You have appeal, especially in like suburban or middle America. I feel like, and this movie, I think, if they had released it properly, could have been a really big hit. Not a giant hit, but it would have made money and been successful, I think, because it's a pretty appealing story, and I feel like it's something anyone could watch really. But like around here, it was only showing in Boston, and
Yeah.
I didn't want to drive into Boston just to see this. You know what I mean? Like at that point, it's kind of it just makes it more difficult to see for so many people, and I feel like this movie was never able to find its audience that it deserved. So it's not an amazing movie, but I thought it was very good, well made. Not my favorite Eastwood, but still solid and worth the watch, I think.
Nice.
And I'm not to spoil anything about the story, but the story is very interesting, and it's not what I expected. So like it was almost the opposite of the Joker, where like 15 minutes into the movie, I was like, oh, I didn't realize this is where this is going, and but in a good way. It didn't turn into a musical. It's just the story was, but it's interesting because in the marketing for Juror Number Two, they don't reveal any of this, but in the movie, you learn something very important like 15 minutes in.
Oh, interesting.
Um, but so I don't know if that was good marketing or bad marketing. It worked for me because then watching the movie, I was like, oh shit, okay. So it was, I
That's kind of
enjoyed
cool.
watching that. Yeah,
I like
it's
that.
yeah, yeah. So so yeah, overall, Juror Number Two was pretty good.
Nice. Nicholas Holt, by the way, for
Yes,
he's of course in the Nosferatu movie that we'll be watching for next week's episode.
yeah, yeah. He's having a good year. He's using some other
Yeah,
stuff too, right? But
probably. Wasn't he in Renfield also?
oh, that was last year though?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Wait, so is this Nosferatu movie going to be like a prequel for his Renfield character? Um, just kidding. But you know what else I watched recently? House, the
Oh yeah.
1977 um, Japanese movie made by Obayashi.
Hmm.
Really good, uh, fantastic, fun movie.
Love
If
that
anyone
movie.
hasn't seen it, strong recommendation. It's goofy, it's fun, it's like Scooby Doo, uh, but not, but goofy, and it's worth it. Totally.
Yeah, it has like very cartoonish humor, very like surreal, off the wall. It's pretty amazing. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
It's in
in one.
it's
I think that's in like my top 50 of all time. It's on my list of. It's up there. Yeah,
nice. It hits a soft spot for me. I think watching the Bloodthirsty trilogy, which are um,
the
those vampire,
vampire.
yeah, those vampire movies that I watched from the 70s by Mikio Yamamoto. Watching those recently, I think made me realize like I have this soft spot for like this 70s period of Japanese horror where it's like a little more gothic, a little more like blending of like Western and Japanese culture and I really I think I have like a soft spot for these movies. Not that this movie you need a soft spot for. I mean, this movie is just amazing, but yeah, it's great, and the special effects are really fun. So
Yeah, it's awesome. Does the Bloodthirsty trilogy have a similar tone as House, or would you say they're more serious?
more serious, but yeah, more serious, but they're all a bit campy still, but definitely more serious than House. Yeah,
Gotcha. Cool.
yeah.
All right. Well, I had one more thing that I wanted to mention. Oh yeah, I watched a Demon Lover yesterday. It's Olivier Assayas uh film from 2002. Um very interesting movie. Sort of explores like the dark web and the internet in 2002. There's like Chloe Sevigny is in it, and Gina Gershon. But it's a French movie, but there's also they speak some Japanese and English as well. But it's like these two companies want the like French or European rights to this company that makes Japanese porno, so they want to distribute it like hentai, I guess. And this woman played by Connie Nielsen is works for one company, but she's secretly working for the other company and sabotaging them. So and then she gets in too deep into this subculture and all these fucked up parts of the internet and all this stuff. So there's sort of like a 8 millimeter or hardcore aspect to it, but with the internet, and it's really interesting. It's yeah, very ahead of its time. I feel like in like understanding like how the ubiquity of screens and the internet and how that would impact everything um, and the international nature of it. You know what I mean? Um,
Yeah.
Also, it was like 2 hours long, and I feel like it could have been shorter. The first hour could have been a little tightened up, in my opinion.
Mhm.
But overall, it was a really interesting movie, and I well, Enjoyed it is a weird word because it gets fucked up, but it was a good movie.
Nice. That's on Max, it looks like, yeah.
Yeah, that's where I watched it.
Nice.
Yeah, very good movie. So I watched some other stuff too. On Christmas, I watched Going My Way, which is the Best Picture winner from 1944, and it was all right. It was a little saccharine, kind of, not super memorable. But then I watched the first 30 minutes of Only Angels Have Wings, the Howard Hawks movie. I think it's 1939, maybe, or some around that time, and that was much better. But I only watched the first like 30 minutes of it, so I didn't log it or anything like that. But
Oh,
eventually, hopefully, I'll get around to watching the rest of the movie. But
nice.
yeah, we kind of just had some movies on TV on Christmas Day. So
Yeah,
yeah.
same. We different route though. We had like the Christmas Chronicles and then the Muppets Christmas Carol on.
Oh yeah, nice.
Some classics, but well, Christmas Chronicles isn't really a classic. Yeah,
I rewatched Elf too, which
of course.
solid movie. But
Yep.
also, in a world where objectively Santa Claus exists, why do none of the adults believe in Santa Claus? Wouldn't everyone understand that the presents are coming from somewhere and it must be Santa Claus?
Shane, this is like the problem with every Christmas movie.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, this is true. This is like in I remember watching the Polar Express this year, and at the very end, spoiler alert for the Polar Express. Sorry, we don't usually spoil stuff in these, but at the very end, the kid opens a present. The parents are like, "Oh, there's one more back there," and he opens it, and of course, it's from Santa, right? And it's like, and the parents are like, "Oh, that's funny. It doesn't work or whatever, right?" And it's so goofy. How would the parents not know? And also, is that the only one the parents don't know about? Because if that's all Santa brought this kid, like that kind of stinks. And also, the parents have to do a lot of work then. Like, do anyway. Spoiler alert for this, like for this holiday tradition. Hopefully, there's no people watching that you know uh don't believe in Santa or whatever.
Oh, no, that's fine. Who
Yeah,
cares? Honestly, our
that'd be
entire society lying to children for
it's
their entire
hilarious.
first like 10 years, it's like kind of crazy, right? I don't
Yeah,
know. I feel like if you take a step back and look at it, it's like, Jesus Christ, we're just lying to every child for the first like 10 years of their life or whatever. And
yeah.
then
But
that's
you give
supposed to
them
be
things.
fine.
So it's kind of like a bribe. You're like, I'm lying to you, but you're not going to complain because I'm giving you free things.
Yeah, I guess so. And then yeah, and then it's also like Easter Bunny and
Oh
Tooth
yeah,
Fairy, all that kind of stuff too.
yeah,
Very strange tradition.
yeah. It's also funny that in all these movies, yeah, the parents, like none of the adults believe in Santa, and yet, like as a kid, you never catch on that, like, hey, why is it that in all these movies the adults don't believe in Santa?
Yeah, true. Well, because kids probably a good amount of kids just trust what their parents say, and
Yeah,
then so they're like, "Well, yeah, duh, they're not gonna lie to me." And then all of a sudden, it's like, "Oh, whole world got shook up."
that's
Yeah.
right.
Anyway,
Anyways, yeah,
that was what we've watched recently. Obviously, it's around Christmas time. Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to everyone watching. And we're gonna get into the public domain movies. The episode is titled Nosferatropolis. So we're gonna start with Nosferatu. This was Ryan's pick, the original 1922 F.W. Murnau film. And
yeah,
yeah, maybe first, because this is kind of an important topic on these movies, we should talk about how we watched it.
yeah. That is important. I watched the Kino restoration, Kino Lorber or Kino International. They have a restoration that's free on Fandango at home with ads. So I suffered through some ads, but I did get to watch. It's I believe the most complete restoration, the Kino International one. So I watched it on there, and it was with the original or recreation of the original Hans Erdmann score.
Okay. I have less information about what I watched.
That's okay.
I so here's a question. When the movie starts, there's like text, and it's like, oh, telling you the backstory of Nosferatu, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
It's like almost setting it as a fairy tale.
Yeah.
What did that look? Did that look like almost
Very
old yellowed pages on a book?
uh definitely old pages on a book with like Gothic font. It was in English.
Well,
Uh,
yeah.
I want to say the pages might have been like greenish or something, but I could be wrong.
Okay. And then, so the version I watched. Well, also, how long was yours? Was it
Mine was 94 minutes. So I believe
okay?
this is the full cut.
All right. Well, I watched something that was 84 minutes, and this is the issue with public domain movies.
Yes.
So I watched this 2 days ago. I didn't. In retrospect, I should have just bought the Blu-ray and just had a reliable version. But then I was running out of time. It wasn't going to be here in time. So I looked on Amazon, and it looked like the version on Amazon. They had a colorized version, which obviously I wasn't going to watch, and they had a black and white version. But obviously, the movie is supposed to be color tinted.
Mhm.
So I didn't want to watch the version on Amazon, which also was like 90 minutes. So it was already a different runtime. And then I tried something on Tubi, and I mean, the intertitles looked crazy. So I tried something else on Plex, and that one I watched it on Plex with ads, but it was color tinted, but it was 84 minutes, and the intertitles were this awful, awful, awful teal font. I don't know what the font is called, but it looked like garbage. I hated it. But I was like, at this point, this is the third version I've tried. I'm just gonna chalk it up to public domain problems and
Yes.
just watch this one. So I don't know. Yeah, that was my experience watching it. But the movie itself was very good.
Yeah. Yeah, and do you know which score was on Plex? No.
I don't know.
I assume it wasn't like it wasn't a heavy metal score.
No, no, that would be cool though.
There
I'd watch that.
is there is indeed a Type O Negative. The band Type O Negative made a score for this movie, but it's on a truncated version of the movie. So I didn't watch it this time because I didn't want to watch a shorter version of the movie for my first viewing. But that version, I believe, is only an hour and 11 minutes. But it is like it's like a heavy metal, and from what I was reading, some people consider it to be like the definitive way to watch this movie. So I kind of do want to rewatch it with that Type O Negative score.
Yeah.
From what I could find, I believe it might be free on YouTube, but I haven't done too much looking into it. So
Hell yeah, that sounds awesome.
seems pretty cool.
And that is a benefit of this being in the public domain, that people can use it and they don't even have to worry about free use. They don't have to worry about copyright issues, and they're allowed to be creative and reuse it in creative ways. So that is the definitely one of the big positives of films being in the public domain.
Absolutely. It does make it a little bit harder when we want to, have a standardized like baseline for the movie itself to talk about, right? And to have the same stuff to talk about. But it is great that there's so many different ways to watch it and so many free ways. I mean, like, this is not a hard to access movie. It's just a hard to find maybe the version you want to watch.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. Even on Fandango at home, there was like 3 free versions, free with ads. One was the 100-year anniversary edition from, I presume, 2022.
Yeah.
But one was the Kino International one, and then there was another one that was quite a bit abridged. So I'm not sure. I didn't look too much into that one, and so there's even on the same service, there's a bunch of different ways to watch it, and I can imagine that could be very overwhelming, right? And I think it was even overwhelming at first, just like I just went to Fandango at home first to see, because I was like, you know what, if I can find like the definitive one on here and rent it that way, I would do that or something. But yeah, I mean, there's just so much you could do so much research into how to watch these movies, and everyone, I'm sure, has their own opinion on like which score or which edit is like the proper one. Um, but yeah, who knows?
Yeah. Yeah. I should have checked Fandango at home, I guess. I never really think to check there. But on Amazon Prime they had, I believe, the 100th anniversary edition, and
Yeah,
that was the one that appeared to not have the color tinting, which
yeah,
is a pretty important part of the movie. I think it really added to, especially like the night scenes with all the blue. I feel like that really added to the atmosphere throughout the movie. So I am glad that I watched a version with color tinting, even though it may have been a little bit truncated, I guess.
yeah. So I mean, I guess we should jump into it, and we can keep talking a little bit about the pros and cons of public domain as we go. But yeah, this is so it's directed by F.W. Murnau, written by Henrik Galeen, and just in terms of our like scoring system that we use or I use, it's got 97% on Rotten Tomatoes, 87% audience score on there, 7.8 out of 10 on IMDb, 3.9 out of 5 on Letterboxd, bringing it to an average of 8.5 out of 10, which is very high. It's one of our highest. It doesn't beat out the current highest, which is the general, but it's very close. I think the general is like 8.7 something or whatever. But
Yeah.
so it's a very well regarded movie today. Although I don't think it's particularly clear if it was always that way. I think it always had like a cult following. But this is essentially a ripoff of Dracula at the time. Not the Dracula movie, of course, because that came out later. But so it's 1922, and the Dracula book by Bram Stoker had been out for, I don't know, 50 years or something.
I think it
And
was only like maybe 25 years.
oh, really?
I think the book I think I saw it came out in like 1897,
Oh,
perhaps.
okay.
So
That makes
it
sense.
was still pretty recent, and that's part of the reason that there was the controversy with the rights and all that.
Yeah.
I don't know if you were going to talk about that, but
Yeah. Um, but yeah, I mean, so this is essentially Galeen and Murnau, their like interpretation of like a German retelling of the Dracula tale. They changed the names to be German, to like be more appealing, perhaps for a German audience. And there's slight differences between this and Dracula. Maybe the most notable being that Nosferatu or Count Orlok, in this looks very different than Dracula. Dracula's like classically interpreted as like a well-dressed, good-looking kind of, ladies' man or something.
yeah,
This is Nosferatu does not look good.
no, the opposite. Looks
Grotesque.
horrible. Looks absolutely terrible.
Um, yeah, kind of like rat-like in a way. Pointed ears, long, exaggerated nose, almost like a deformed head. Very, very grotesque. And so that's probably the most notable difference. And also, there's one really important difference that happens in vampire lore in this retelling, which is that in Dracula, I believe Dracula is only like weakened by the sunlight, but can exist in it. Nosferatu cannot exist in the sunlight, and that's ultimately spoiler. Of course, we're doing spoilers for these movies. The sunlight is ultimately the end of this movie. It's how Nosferatu gets defeated in a way. So yeah, but it's set in 1830s in Germany, which I believe is earlier than Dracula is set. I think Dracula may be set like closer to the 1900s, but I don't know. I'm not a Dracula fiend, but
Interesting. I don't even I didn't realize it was set then, but I assumed it was earlier because of the plague aspect. I
yeah,
assumed it was more 1500s ish.
yeah, yeah. That's an interesting. Yeah, the plague. I mean, there had been like a bunch of plagues
Right.
throughout history. Like the same plague kind of hit multiple times, I think. Um, but yeah, there is definitely that plague aspect that comes in, and Nosferatu kind of brings that plague to this city. Um,
Yeah.
Visburn,
Yeah. It was Visberg, I guess.
Visburg. Um,
Yeah. But so I was wondering, have you seen the 1979 Werner Herzog Nosferatu the Vampire?
I have not. Have you?
Okay. Yeah, I have. I didn't rewatch it for this episode, but I've seen it like twice back a couple years ago. Um, and so that also like, yeah, it's set in the 19th century, I guess, that film also. I guess because of the plague, I just was like, oh, it's set so much farther back, but it makes sense because sort of that fancy. I don't know the way I feel like if it was set further back, they would have been dressed a little less fancy.
Yeah,
You know?
maybe. Yeah, I imagine there's a point where it's harder to set it further back because like they were filming on location here, right? In this, I mean, old town, but I imagine like for us, it probably wouldn't make a difference. I would believe it either way, but like maybe at the time, people wouldn't believe that that was like hundreds of years ago, right?
Right. Well, it'd be like today setting a movie in the 1920s versus the 1700s. Like that's a pretty
Yeah,
significant difference. 100
yeah,
years back versus like 300 or 400.
right. And still trying to like actually film at a location, right? Like it's hard
Yeah.
enough to find a location that looks like the 70s, right? So yeah,
Yeah, I think the on location filming, like the a lot of the exterior shots of the woods and stuff were very atmospheric, and I loved the castle that this is set in. It made me want to go to a castle, like go to Europe. I mean, we don't have castles here, like that, and that is such like a difference in being American versus being you're almost I mean anywhere else, but like we just don't have those type of like if something's from the 1800s here, it's like whoa, that's really old. And
right.
there's barely anything from the 1700s whereas like we talked about Saltburn, I after that episode I ended up looking it up I think. The house in Saltburn was built in like the year 1300.
Yeah,
Like that's how old it is. Like it goes back to like monarchy and like pre like so far back, and that's the reality in Europe. Like they have all these buildings and structures that go so far back, and it's not just Europe. Obviously, also in the Middle East and Asia and everything, where they had these type of things that have survived over time. There's just not as much of that in America, so it's kind of a cool. It's just kind of cool to see.
definitely. And a lot of the like on location filming of this with the castle, the village, and the mountains. I mean, the mountains were like stunning to me, and it reminded me so much of the like the filming of The Sound of Music, which admittedly is just also on the German Alps and filmed on location. So like, yeah, but I don't know. Like, I just couldn't help but draw parallels because you're right. Like to us, all of that stuff is harder to come by, right? Like you don't see it very often, if at all, right? And so it's in these movies where they're like the front piece of the movie is at least in a way the fact that it's filmed on location at this like very old and like scenic place that yeah, like I think I've seen like a place like this in very few movies even. So it's really cool when it happens.
Yeah, definitely. And that's sort of like we have really good like nature in America, like especially in the West. There are a lot of big open spaces and old westerns being shot that there's
Right.
we have the Grand Canyon, that type of stuff, more space. But I feel like a unique benefit to like movies set in Europe is that you can set it in so far in the past and you could find a building that's like, oh, this is actually a real house that was built in the year 1600 or something like that. You know what I mean? It's kind of just a really cool aspect of the movie.
Yeah, definitely. The fact that it's filmed on location is like one of like the points that I kept going back to even because it just like you can tell, right? Like there's so many times where it's clear that they're not on set. The interiors are in a set, but there's so many times where it's like it's very clear that this is not like a miniature or that this is not a green screen, especially nowadays, but that it's like really you're really there, right? Even the opening shot, or one of yeah, I think it's the first shot is of the town, and it's on the like the camera's on a rooftop, and it's just looking down on this town, and you can see the roof that it's on, right? Like it's very visible, and it's just like what a great shot to open a movie where you're just showing off the location that you're able to get, right?
Hmm.
Amazing.
Yep, and that's the shot of like the church like bell also, right? It's like
Yeah.
sort of in the center of the shot.
Mhm.
Yeah. Also, a little like on his trip to Transylvania, there's a shot of an animal. I don't know what it is. Do you know what that was?
It looked. Is this the cat? Right? It's like an ocelot or something.
It kind of looked
Ocelot.
like a wolf, but like a weird, not a wolf.
Wolf or not? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Some big like dog or cat animal. I don't know. I don't know what it is.
yeah, almost looked like a hyena or like something along those lines. I
Mhm.
wasn't sure what that was.
Yeah. Me neither. But yeah, brave of them to film it. I'm sure.
Yeah, yeah, right. But yeah, um, yeah. I mean, one thing in this movie I think that is kind of interesting. I don't think they fully get into it in this movie, but in the Herzog version, they do get more in. It's kind of a main theme of the movie, I think, is this aspect of like superstition, because when Harker is or Hutter,
Yeah.
when Hutter is on his trip to Transylvania, the people uh, driving him, in the horse and buggy or whatever, they're like, "Oh, we're not gonna go past this mountain. It's haunted over there. We don't go over there." And he's like, "Ha ha ha!" He like laughs him off, like no big deal. So he's sort of not a superstitious man, and then he learns like, "Oh shit! Like there's things we can't explain, kind of a thing. Like nature's mysterious, all that kind of stuff." And that is in this movie, but I think that's even more in the Herzog version of Nosferatu.
Yeah, the Herzog version is definitely on my watch list after watching this. Is
Yeah.
that I believe in that one also? Does he go back to using the Dracula names? It's like the Nosferatu story, but with the Dracula names.
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
Interesting.
But yeah, it's really. I mean, it's a really good movie. Isabella Johnny is in it, and Klaus Kinski plays Nosferatu, and yeah, it's really cool. But there was like, I mean, there are rats in the movie, obviously, and I think they like, from what I remember when I watched it, they like bleached the rats or something, like they're pretty
Oh,
fucked up. Yeah, they kind of. So that was like a kind of fucked up part of that I learned about the making of the movie. Um, which Herzog would do stuff like that. Like he would kind of do anything to make his movie, it seemed like. Uh, which is probably my least favorite aspect of him, obviously,
yeah.
for obvious reasons. But just if, aside from that, it is a good movie and it's definitely interesting to watch, probably because now you've seen
Yeah.
the Eggers one and the Murnau one, so I think it would be worth watching.
Um, have you seen on a similar vein while we're talking about? I mean, there's many adaptations of the vampire story, including Nosferatu, but then there's even many interpretations of Nosferatu after, right? There's the Herzog one, and now, of course, the Eggers one. Have you seen Shadow of the Vampire?
No, I've never seen it, but I have heard of it. I've wanted to see it, but
Yeah, it's on my watch list now too. This is a movie from 2000, where Willem Dafoe plays Max Schreck, the actor in this movie, in the original movie, who plays Nosferatu. But this is kind of like a meta movie about John Malkovich plays F.W. Murnau, and it's about Murnau like making a deal with an actual vampire, with the actual Nosferatu to play in his movie, and letting him kill people on set or something. I don't know. I haven't seen it, but it sounds awesome. And as I was watching this movie and doing the research on it, this kept coming up, and it seems like right up my alley. So I'm very excited to try to make time to watch this at some point.
yeah, definitely. I mean, I love Willem Dafoe, and I think that movie may have been hard to find for a while,
Uh,
but I think it might be available to rent now. I'm not sure, but yeah, but I've heard good things about that, and I know that there's also like a Nosferatu in Venice, where I believe Klaus Kinski also plays Nosferatu again, but it's not directed by Werner Herzog. And that's also another element of it being in the public domain, is kind of
yeah.
anyone can make like a quote unquote sequel to your movie, whether you like it or not, like kind of a thing, you know?
Yeah. Which I mean, like, yeah, there are like many retellings of this. If you just like Google Nosferatu, or like even just put it in on Letterboxd, right? And you just type in Nosferatu, there's a lot of stuff that comes up, and most of it is not what you're looking for, probably, but
Yeah.
which can be a bad thing because it can like kind of dilute what you're looking for, but also it can be a good thing because there's a lot more creative expression um, in this story, which is cool.
Yeah, definitely. And like uh the original movie obviously was kind of or not even kind of, it just was a ripoff of Dracula. And Bram Stoker's widow sued Murnau and the production company for like the rights to this, and they won, I believe. And I believe it was in Germany, the government ordered like all copies of Nosferatu to be destroyed. But it was 1925, so by the time they ordered that, it had already been shipped to America, and it was already so, and they couldn't enforce the European copyright laws in America, so that's how the movie survived. But yeah, sort of this movie was supposed to be killed by copyright laws, and it sort of snaked its way out of it by coming to good old USA.
Yeah.
So
And
it's kind of just an
actually,
interesting backstory.
it is, and I think it gives a lot of like history um, to this story in general, and the fact that like it is really close to Dracula, like close enough that they won that lawsuit. But in a way, it really does have its own cult following of people that certainly distinguish it from Dracula, even at the time, right? Because those film reels that got sent internationally were getting circulated around and had like a cult following at the time. Um, but and the production company Prana Films went out. This was the only film they ever made because they got sued to shit and went bankrupt.
That makes sense. That's what happens when you make a ripoff of a book, I guess, right?
Yeah. But and speaking of like, so one thing that I want to bring up is that this is, of course, a ripoff of the Dracula novel, and yeah, we shouldn't be plagiarizing, copywriting, whatever. Copyright infringement bad, but there is something to say about the fact that this is really like a very early film adaptation um, of a monster story, right? And in the 30s, we end up seeing 30s and 40s, we get like the big wave of Universal monsters in America. But other than the Golem, which was actually in 1915, the Golem came out. And similar to Nosferatu, there's like a subtitle. So Nosferatu, A Symphony of Horror, and the Golem has some subtitle too that I don't know. But and it's written by Henrik Levin, who is the writer for this. But other than that, there's really like I couldn't find really any feature length monster movies that existed before those two. And in this whole realm of like German expressionism, that the Golem and Nosferatu and even Metropolis, which we'll talk about later, all exist within. It's amazing that like I think it's hard not to give this a lot of credit for making a monster movie or making a monster story from a book onto the big screen, which of course then gets taken off late, some like 8 or 9 years later or whatever it is. I think Dracula comes out. Universal's Dracula is like 1931 or something, and so it's not too long after, right? And I think it's hard not to think like that this movie's cult success didn't help lead to some of that, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. This is sort of a big, super influential movie, and it's
Yeah,
still influential today with the Eggers movie coming out and being a really big hit. Actually, I think it made like something like $40 million over Christmas weekend, something like that. So like it still has that cultural imprint. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Um, but yeah, so it kind of an interesting part of this movie, may potentially controversial depending on how people interpret it, because you said that this is written by Henrik Galeen, and he also wrote The Golem, which it says it came out in 1920.
oh,
But
okay,
yeah, whatever. But which is only 2 years before this. But Henrik Galeen apparently was Jewish,
yes,
and there is definitely you could see Jewish stereotypes potentially in Nosferatu,
yeah,
where Nosferatu is could be definitely seen as an immigrant at the very least, or at least an outsider that brings plague and death, and he's going to kill your women and all this kind of stuff. And there is that aspect of sort of, you know, anti-outsider, and obviously in 1920s Germany, and given he has a giant nose. He's super rich and owns land, and the I think sort of the rhetoric in like the 30s in Germany was a lot of like them Jewish people, you know, treating them as like a disease almost, and this has those correlations. But it's also written by a Jewish guy,
Yeah.
and the Golem. That I have not seen the movie, but the description says. In 16th century Prague, a rabbi creates the golem, a giant creature made of clay. Using sorcery, he brings the creature to life in order to protect the Jews of Prague from persecution.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It seems that that could be an aspect of the movie. I don't think I'm qualified to like completely give like a take like, oh my God, Nosferatu is anti-Semitic. You know what I mean? Nosferatu is a Nazi
Yeah.
movie. That would be crazy, obviously, for me to say that. But maybe people with more of a I don't know what's known of Henrik Galeen and his life, or just that much about the history of the Weimar Republic and all that kind of stuff. But I'm sure there's a lot that you could probably write a thesis about that, right?
I'm sure. Yeah, I saw a lot of stuff about this too, and it's interesting. The Golem is like a traditional tale in Jewish religion and culture, as like a construct that protects Jewish people in times of persecution. I don't know too much about it, but I know that it's like a thing far before that movie. And I think it's also important here to point out that F.W. Murnau was gay, and fled Germany, I believe. Not too long after this, obviously, there's some stuff that happens in Germany, and and he flees Germany and he moves to Hollywood. I don't know. I mean, I think he moves to Hollywood in like 1926. So I don't know actually how much of that was fleeing Germany versus just moving to America, because it's at least in my understanding of like that type of history, I think it's a little early, maybe.
Yeah.
But either way, but yeah. So I mean, the director here is gay, and the writer is Jewish. Like these are two people that I'm sure are very sensitive to the that trope of the other, right? And not, I'm sure that these two people do not want to necessarily endorse like prejudice on a susceptible group, right, at the time. So I think like it's hard to think that like these two would intentionally put out like anti-Semitic tropes, right? It seems to me more like a lot of people involved in the production of this movie, and a lot of people just in general at this time, were survivors of World War One, right? And in World War One, rats were like, abundant in the trenches, right? And they spread disease in the trenches. So to me, it might be more realistic to think of this as like maybe Nosferatu represented disease in the trenches, right? And maybe he's more of a retelling of like the shit that happens because of war, right? And kind of living with the aftermath of that, as opposed to being the other, right? Which I think is like an interpretation that's like pretty widespread out there, but it's hard for me to fall into understanding why these two people would make that, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's definitely it's possible that it was almost just a subconscious thing, that this is just the story and it just happened to come out that way, and that's how, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that if that's how it's interpreted by certain people, that then it is what it is, you know what I mean? Whether the artist intended it or not.
Yeah.
But yeah, that does make sense. That I didn't know FW Murnau was gay, but
Yeah. Yeah, and
yeah.
I think when he moved to Hollywood, he like had a thing with a young actor or something. But
Gotcha. Yeah, that there's a lot of whatever actors and directors. I know James Whale, who did he didn't do Dracula, but he did what did he direct? He directed some Universal Monster stuff, right? I know he did like the old Dark House, I think it was called. Anyway, James Whale was also gay. Long story short.
yeah,
So, and there's plenty of actors that were, in the closet, and they had roommates, you know what I mean, stuff like that. So
Yeah,
so yeah, it definitely was sort of a common but still swept under the rug thing at the time.
right.
Um,
Yeah, so I mean, I think in terms of that whole the other like I'm sure that there's like credit to that interpretation. But it's hard to think that these people might have made that intentionally, right? I think there might have been other thoughts on why they made some of this symbolism, and even if that's what ended up being interpreted, I think that's a shame. I don't think that's I think that's almost clearly not what they hoped for. But
hmm,
of course, nobody can go back into their minds, so it's hard to say. But
right. But yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I don't think it's something that ruins the movie or anything like that for me. It's just sort of an interesting uh discussion point, I guess.
yeah, definitely,
Um,
it's definitely something I wrote down to bring up at some point. So
yeah. Yeah,
um,
I mean one of the other big parts of the movie, I think, and one of the most influential. I have not seen the Robert Eggers movie, but I understand that shadows are a big factor in the movie, and this movie uses shadows really, really well, especially toward the end.
mm,
Uh, just the use of shadows is really genius and very iconic. There's a lot of iconic shots in this movie. Um, and yeah, so I just thought the use of shadows was great.
oh yeah. The lighting in general in much of the movie felt very like intentional to make those shadows happen. And I can't imagine how much work went into setting up some of these shadow shots, right? Like I don't know. I guess I guess it can't be that hard at the time to like just make a lot of lighting in a certain way, but like today, I imagine it's pretty easy just to, like plop a big light stand somewhere and turn off all the lights. But I don't know how easy that was at the time, right?
Yeah, yeah. I imagine it definitely like when you see it like the shadow going up the stairs.
Oh
It's
yeah,
like when you watch it, it feels totally natural. But then when filming it, it's like, okay, so how exactly are we going to get the shadow to move the right way and not like get smaller or shrink or you know what I mean? Like, so it is
right.
definitely a complicated thing that you need to do very intentionally.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, there's a lot of cool shadow shots. I was writing down some for a while, and then I was like, yeah, shadows. Like they're like haunting in this, and they're a thing that like really I think hits on your like one of these like subconscious fears that we all have of like a shadow represents something that you don't see, right? Because like you just see the shadow, but you don't know what's there. And so I think a shadow can be very like scary from a young age for many people. You know, totally not speaking from experience. Um, um, and so I think that like just using the shadows in this way was a really good way to instill horror at a time when like horror tropes and how to horrify and scare your audience wasn't obviously well established, right? This is a really early horror film in general. So um, many of the many of the methods that we use today to scare people obviously weren't invented or weren't thought of or weren't used yet. And
Yeah.
this is one that I think like uh, instills this method of shadow work into the future of film.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I think there is to go along with what you said about this coming out right after World War One. There is that aspect of this being sort of a horror that is a shadow on society, and you know, shadows do have a lot of metaphorical meaning. You could look at it that way as something haunting society almost, or darkness within. It's just the unknown also, and yeah, also yeah, it's just scary because you can't see what's there.
Yeah.
So that's but
Yeah, I like that metaphorical take too, though. That makes sense.
yeah, definitely. And I'm just thinking of the Eggers like that shot in the trailer of the hand going over the city or whatever,
Yeah.
which I saw an interview with him about how they did that, which is really cool. But
Oh,
yeah, apparently there was like CGI in it, but everyone thought it was miniatures. But that's just how good the CGI was. But
wow.
it was nice of him to say that in the interview. But but yeah, just that the shadow over the city, the shadows having all this metaphorical meaning. I think it adds it makes it really creepy and just in a visceral way, but also it lends itself to interpretation and metaphor as well.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I also think, like, just thinking about while we're talking about like the shadow and all this stuff, Max Schreck as Count Orlok is uh, like he just plays this role so well, and it's so incredibly creepy, and I adore it.
Yeah, iconic.
Yeah,
I love the part when he is when Hutter, not Harker, is looking from the window and he sees him stacking the coffins of dirt, and then he gets in the one on the top, and then the top of the coffin like almost stop motion goes up like magically, like so
yeah,
he has these supernatural powers, I guess, of some sort. But I just thought that was very cool. It's a little practical effect in the movie to show his magic.
yeah. And again on the boat, right? I think after the boat docks, there's like a little tarp over the hatch, and the tarp in stop motion moves, and then the hatch goes up in slow motion, and then he just like ascends slowly into the, like, it doesn't even really look like he's climbing a ladder. He just kind of like ascends.
Yeah,
Very creepy.
yeah. I think one of the creepiest shots is earlier when Hutter is like, I guess it's just I forget exactly what the time is, but Nosferatu is asleep in the coffin, and
Mm,
Hutter like sees him, and there's like a hole in the coffin, and you can see like his teeth, like rat teeth, and he's just sleeping in the coffin. It's a very creepy looking close up
yeah.
of Orlok, and there are a lot of iconic shots like that. Obviously, there's also the shot which was used in SpongeBob, which is very iconic. I was watching this with my girlfriend on the couch, and she was like, "Oh, that's from SpongeBob." And I was like,
Yeah.
"Yep, yeah, it is." And also, not to go with our theme, the public domain. I'm sure, I don't know all the details about when this was in the public domain or anything like that, but I imagine because it's a ripoff, they couldn't copyright it.
Yeah.
So they could just put it in SpongeBob, and they were like, "Well, no one's going to sue us." So, so, but yeah, there's that shot, him coming out of the coffin. Also, there's the very funny segment of him running around town holding a coffin
Yeah.
on his hip. I thought that was pretty funny.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I liked that shot a lot. Almost like goofy, but it was great.
yeah, and obviously the ending with the shadows, him going up the stairs, all that kind of stuff. Very very iconic. And also Greta Schroeder, who plays
Yeah.
Ellen. I think she also gives a very good performance in this movie. With this and Metropolis, I do think silent film acting is a difficult thing to adjust to sometimes. And like with Gustav von Wangenheim, I guess that's his name. He plays Hutter. And um, sorry, Wangenheim just got me a little like, come on, Wangenheim. Anyway, he's dead. It's fine. Um, like his performance is just kind of big and so dramatic. That also happens in Metropolis. Like
Yeah.
I forget the guy's name, the main
The main
character.
guy.
Yeah, the main actor, and that like he just seems like such a drama queen because the guy, the actor is just so over the top. I'm like, oh my god, guy. So that is definitely. But I think Ellen and Orlok are actually like pretty like easy to adjust to. They don't have as much of that over the top uh silliness to me. At
Yeah.
least I didn't get that from them. But
Yeah, I would agree. I think Orlon really plays it off as like or rather Max Schreck really plays it off as being like pretty stern, like not very expressive. And somehow that makes him even more haunting in this, right? Especially in a time when, yeah, like acting was kind of dominated in silent films by very expressive, very emotive reactions, right? Which, I mean, it's funny because like there's a shot early on. Uh, yeah, so when he gets to the inn or the whatever the bar or whatever, and he's drinking and everyone's happy, having a good time, whatever. And then he says, "One more beer. I'm off to I'm off to the castle in the morning or something, and he slams it down, or I'm about to head off to the castle or something. He slams down the thing, and then everyone in the bar's face just turns like eyes wide open, and like they all like just turn right to him like right away. And that's like an almost an iconic thing that still happens in cinema and in TVs today, is like that immediate everyone in the room reaction, right? That very expressive and emotive reaction that obviously doesn't really happen in real life, but I think that's like a remnant of the silent era that still happens a lot in film today. And it was fun to see it here in a really, I assume, a fairly early adaptation of it.
Yeah. Yeah, another thing that this is really early on is, well, the first scene is Ellen and Hutter in their sort of domestic life, and then at least in the version I saw, the next scene is him walking to his to Harding's office or whatever, and there's an
Mhm.
old man who like talks to him on the way, and he says that, I forget the exact quote, but he says like, you can't escape. Oh, don't be in a rush because you can't escape your destiny. And
Yeah,
that sort of like the harbinger of doom trope is still in horror movies, of someone
right.
being like, oh, you better be careful, and that then the teenage kid's like, ah, it's fine, or you know what I mean.
Yeah,
Also interesting, that the main character is like a real estate like broker, like he's just like a realtor.
yeah,
Very like, it feels out of place. Like that feels like a modern job to me, but I'm like, I guess people have been selling real estate for a long time, right? So it makes sense, but it's just kind of funny.
yeah. Um, One other like just really cool shot that I thought was, or one really like honestly, my favorite scenes maybe in the movie were on the boat. I feel like I have to bring up the boat because it was so cool.
Yeah.
He's like the people get infected by the plague, but then there's also a shot where you see him like kind of half faded. Like it seems like they like superimposed um, an image of him, and it's kind of
Yep.
one of these first times where I'm realizing like, wait, what the hell is his powers? What the hell, like, what is he able to do? Because yeah, and then pretty soon after this is when you see the stop motion of the thing opening, and there was the one earlier, but it all starts to hit me here that like one, the whole boat thing was creepy and eerie and amazing with the blue tint and everything too, but like yeah, what is his powers? He seems to be able to do whatever he wants.
Yeah, he turns like Harding into like a raving madman, like almost like his slave kind of a thing.
Yeah,
He Yeah, it is very strange. I think that is usually something that doesn't work for me in movies, when the rules are very unclear like that, and it just feels like anyone can do anything magical. Um, but yeah, I do think it works in this kind of, especially him as almost being this metaphorical like thing.
yeah,
So it kind of works in that way. But
and he's got a pretty big downside. You know, like dude, if you stay up a little too late or too early, I guess for him, like you die. That sucks.
yeah, that's crazy that he's even lasted this long.
And you got to lug
Um,
dirt around with you.
yeah, true. Yeah. Um, Kind of, yeah, an interesting part of this movie is that he looks so inhuman. Like
Yeah,
he would never be able to be a part of society, really. Like he looks so monstrous.
right.
But like you said, Dracula and a lot of other vampire things, with the immortality comes uh sort of, you stay at the age when you became immortal, I guess, and people, they look good kind of forever. That's kind of a thing. So I don't know, is immortality is specifically mentioned in this movie or no?
I don't think so.
Hmm.
Although, you know what? There's some times when he's reading through the book. At the end, he finds that book about Nosferatu and he reads through
Yeah,
it. And I don't really remember everything that's in that book, but I don't think it's fully mentioned that there's immortality at all.
right.
Um, and I know like they say the dirt gives him his powers. Like if he has the dirt in the ground in which he was buried, that's what gives him his
Uh,
powers. So I guess like he must be afterlife because he was
right.
buried.
So he's somehow magically come back to life.
And there's this whole occult element too that we actually haven't touched on, where what's his name? Knock, I think is his name in this, but is like reading that occult um, deal or whatever. And at one and Orlok gives not what's his name in this? Orlok gives
Hutter.
Hutter, yep.
Also, yeah, I was saying Harding, but I meant Knock the
Yeah.
whole time. Yeah.
I mean, they're the same characters, right? But gives gives Hutter the deal or whatever, the contract to sign that's also in that like weird symbol language, and I think he might call it like his own language or whatever, like language from his people or something. But and I think when he's reading that book, it mentions something about a devil. So like, there's a lot of like occult elements here that that like don't fully explain in the movie what happened, like why he's alive and stuff, or whatever, but seem to like allude to the fact that there's more going on here than just, you know, like in Dracula. I think like you just I don't even know actually. Why does Dracula come back? I don't
Well,
remember.
generally, so in this movie, when he bites people, he kind of just sucks their blood,
Oh
but
yeah,
they just kind of he just gets sick, probably because of blood loss. But normally in vampire movies, when you bite of someone, well, I guess they either die or they turn into a vampire.
right.
But
In
that
this,
doesn't
that
seem to
doesn't
be an
happen.
aspect. Yeah, exactly.
Right. That's true. So Dracula perhaps gets like turned into a vampire by someone, but in this, there seems to be like some occult aspect that's happening,
Yeah,
which is really
and
interesting at the time period, because it seems like there's also some occult stuff that goes on in Metropolis, but um, some like
maybe,
weird
yeah.
occulty. I don't know if that was just a thing at the time. Everyone was
I don't
like,
remember any occult stuff in Metropolis, but I feel like
uh,
it's more like sci-fi in Metropolis. I feel like.
yeah, I guess that's true. I guess I'm thinking of like the church, but I guess that's just religion and not really a cult.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That was just mob mentality, I think. Yeah,
um,
but yeah, the
fun
I
tidbit.
think. Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry. No, you good.
I was just gonna say on that topic. I think the fact that it is unexplained does work, and that mystery behind the character really works for him just being this symbol of darkness and terror. And if everything was explained, it might take away from the mystery and the terror, the horror of it all. So I think it, intentionally or not, it leaving it unexplained works for the movie.
Yeah, I agree. Um, but as an ironic twist of fate, Murnau's skull is stolen when his grave is broken into many years later, and they find like during the investigation they find like wax, like burnt wax and stuff, and so they think that there was like an occult thing that happened when people stole his skull. So
Whoa,
uh,
interesting! I never knew that.
yeah, spooky. I think there's even like a mini documentary about that, but I haven't watched it. I just read about it, but um, yeah. So some people
Interesting.
maybe took the occult stuff in this movie a little too far.
Yeah, right. All right. Well, we are getting a little. I mean, should we wrap this up? Is there anything else you wanted to mention on classic Nosferatu?
I think we hit on all my main stuff for Nosferatu. Yeah, I mean, I gave this movie 4 stars. Movie rocks.
Nice. I gave it 3.5.
All right, fair enough.
I definitely enjoyed it. Really good, and I think this movie also is very well paced.
Yeah.
Like it's pretty much always going, and the story is evolving. Back in the day, whenever I first watched it, I think I kind of expected he just goes to the castle and then creepy stuff happens, and that was going to be the whole movie. But
Mhm.
the just because I wasn't familiar with the story, but then the fact that it does have him Nosferatu going back and all that, I think the story is is interesting enough, and it's well paced. Basically, is my point. So it's
Yeah.
entertaining throughout, and I enjoyed it. 3.5 for me.
Nice. And I think that I'm in the boat of people that thinks this is distinct enough from Dracula that that well, I'm certainly happy that it exists, of course, but also that I think it makes its own reputation.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, definitely one of the most iconic uh, movies of the 1920s for sure, and influential.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Speaking of,
oh yeah, another very influential movie. Um, we're going to talk about Metropolis, directed by Fritz Lang, 1927. Took like a year and a half to film. They filmed it in 1925 to 1926. Came out in January of 1927, I believe. And yeah, one of the most influential I mean, arguably the most influential sci-fi movie of all time. Just because without this, I don't know if sci-fi exists in the way it does today, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, on the copyright status of it, apparently the U.S. copyright lapsed in 1953, and then it was restored in 1996, and
Huh.
then in 2023 it lapsed in the U.S. again, January 1st, 2023, because it was 95 years since it came out, I guess. So that's why it's in the public domain now. However, it's still under copyright in Germany and the EU until 2046, which would be 70 years after Fritz Lang's death. Um,
Oh, interesting.
so
Different
it
law.
is, yeah, exactly. So it is public domain in the US, not in Europe. Um, and yeah, like the last one I'll say, I watched this on a Blu-ray. It was the Kino Lorber, uh, the restoration from 2010, where they basically found 25 more minutes of the film that were previously lost. So it was 2 hours and 28 minutes. Um, yeah, and that's how I watched it. How'd you watch it?
Yeah, and I watched the same. Although I bought the digital copy on Fandango at home. I'm generally physical media person, but you know what? I didn't want to order it, so and it was on sale. It was like $5 on Fandango at home, so yeah, totally worth it. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty awesome that I think it was like in 2008. They found like a damaged original print, right, of the whole movie, of the original release, in a museum in Argentina, and that's what Kino International used for the restoration. And it's very noticeable when they're playing those scenes that were originally missing
Yeah,
because it is a damaged print, and it was a different. There was something about the aspect ratio too because they had to like, cut off certain. They had to cut off like the sides and stuff or something.
yeah. It
So
is interesting to see those shots and know what they cut out, because it seems like pretty much the subplot with the Thin Man looking for 1181, that in almost that entire subplot was cut out.
yeah,
And other than that, it was really just some random shots here and there where like toward the end and the climax, there are some shots that are taken out here and there, but it doesn't really affect the story. Um, and but that one subplot was the main thing that was cut out. And I'm not gonna lie, I wouldn't have minded it being cut out. That was like the worst part of the movie, and I was like, I don't know. The movie's pretty long. Like it didn't necessarily need these extra 25 minutes. I'm glad they're there for film history, but also the just 2 hour version is the version that people have been seeing for decades and decades and became a classic. So it is interesting that we both watched the longer version, which I don't know if it's necessarily better than the truncated version.
yeah. It is interesting. I think still only 95% has been has been restored. I think there was still a few missing like black moments of scenes, and the Kino International version does like a good job at the beginning, kind of explaining this process and what you'll see and what you might not see. And it's impressive to me that they were able to get all this footage back and be able to intertwine it with the original footage, or rather uh, intertwine the original with kind of the better restored version. And I think that's awesome and that's great. Like, yeah, film history and we like lost media is terrible. Like, keep everything that we can, right? And I also just think the story behind like them finding it is pretty awesome, right? They just found it in a museum in Argentina. Like that's kind of funny.
Yeah, that's really cool.
For like decades, people are looking for this thing. Yeah, like the resurgence to like restore the full length has been around since like the 70s. Like it wasn't always people didn't really always care about it, uh, but yeah, so like decades go by and eventually they find it in like an old museum.
Yeah,
Makes you wonder
it
if they'll
is.
find a better version.
Yeah, and I wonder how that version got there, because after World War II,
Oh,
a lot of German people,
well, I
after
will say this
losing,
movie kind of got taken over by the Nazi Party. Uh,
mm,
in a way, it was very like let's say, well liked by the Nazi Party. And
It's,
Thea von Harbu,
mhm.
who wrote this with, so she was married at the time to Fritz Lang, but pretty soon after they got divorced and he moved to America, and she wrote and continued to make movies that were state sponsored.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that.
So I think there was, let's say, a reason they got divorced.
Maybe, yeah, it could have been
Political
the
differences or
thing.
something.
Yeah, because Fritz Lang makes M in 1931. So he was still in Germany into the 30s. So I
Yeah.
don't know how, I don't know exactly when he came over to America, but
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure either,
but yeah, that is interesting. And it's also interesting because I feel like some people interpreted this movie as being communist.
yeah,
Um,
I was reading all about that, and so I was like, why? I don't really understand how those two things go hand in hand, I guess.
well, I don't think it's either. I don't think it's a Nazi movie or a communist movie. I think it's actually kind of a moderate, almost anti-revolution movie. Because,
Mm.
I mean, we are going to do spoilers. I mean, maybe I can just say this now. We don't
Yeah.
necessarily need to go in order. But, like, by the end of the movie, so the whole message, as I said at the very beginning, there's this epigram that starts at the beginning of the movie, and it's the mediator between brain and hands must be the heart. And basically, the management class and the upper class are the brain. They sort of plan things and all that. And the hands are the working class and they work the machines and all that. And the heart is sort of just a mediator between the two so that it's not class warfare and it's not, so it kind of has a Marxist like understanding of class at first, where it's the working class and the owners, and they're two different, proletariat versus them. And but then the solution, if it was a communist thing, the solution would be a dictatorship of the proletariat. It would not be the son of the king, basically, like mediating and being like, okay, we're gonna have some reform. So this is
Right.
actually a very like moderate movie, in my opinion, where the revolution is sort of treated as mob mentality of all these sort of lumpen proletariat people who just kind of follow whatever their leader says, and they create chaos and they flood the city, and it's shown in a very negative light. So I didn't think this was communist or uh, fascist or anything like that. I thought it was kind of a democratic, reform based like ideology behind the movie. But
Yeah, I was reading, I mean, everywhere that you read, pretty much, you'll see stuff about the communist messages in the movie, pretty vaguely. And I also, like, I was like, I don't really understand, like, maybe I'm just not well enough informed about communism. Like, I don't really get it. Like, I don't really see communism in this. I do see the whole class. Obviously, there's the very criticized in the movie class divide, but that's not solely a communist, like, that's not solely a problem that communism tries to tackle, right? Like, that's a problem that we all have to, like, it's a problem that today in America even is obviously a big problem. And anyways, and I don't really, I know that I was reading about that the Nazis were into this movie, but I don't know why. But that's probably how it ended up in Argentina. You're probably right.
yeah, I mean,
Yikes.
almost certainly, right? So
Yeah.
thanks to that Nazi for doing one good thing in his life, I guess, right? Um, but sorry, that was a dark joke. But um, I think the only thing that I saw that I could connect to Nazism at all was perhaps some of the wide shots and the scale of everything sort
Mm,
of reminded me of like some Lenny Riefenstahl like Triumph of the Will type of thing, where they have maybe just the grandeur of the movie and that kind of stuff maybe is like, this is aspirational to like what the Aryan race can be, kind of a thing, like,
yeah.
but that's really taking those shots out of context of the story, where the story does not appear to be not a Nazi type of story at all. But
Yeah. And again, like, like if you think about who, I mean, I guess it's harder with this one because I was gonna say if you think about who made the movie, like thinking about with Nosferatu, uh, you know, what's his name?
Fritz Lang.
Fritz Lang, thank you. Um, was he left Germany, I believe, because of the Nazi
Hitler.
Revolution.
Yeah.
Hold on. Let's see if I can find it. Probably not.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
gonna take, but
he was definitely anti-Nazi, Fritz Lang.
yeah,
But then, as you said, Thea von Harbou might have been more pro-Nazi. But even then, I think, again, even regardless of their intentions, I think just based on the final product, it doesn't appear to be like that to me at all. But
yeah, yeah. I'm inclined to agree. I think you're totally right. Like the grandeur of all this, like this movie is like the shots of the city and everything, incredible, right? Like,
yeah,
and you can see why anyone really would be maybe inspired by that. And indeed, I think many filmmakers later on are inspired by wanting to portray massive like Art Deco style cities, or even more futuristic at the time, futurist for the time cities, in their work. And in this, I think he does a really good. The filmmakers in general in this movie do a really good job at making the city look like this huge, big character in itself, right?
oh yeah, the
Especially the
mini,
divide, like that was really cool.
yeah, definitely, and the use of miniatures was awesome, and it just having the super tall buildings, aren't there flying cars? There's
Yeah,
and there's like
yeah.
these tall bridges, like it
It
felt
might be
very.
planes. Yeah,
Oh, I guess planes. Yeah, I think you're right. But still, there's just planes flying around a city. What's up with
yeah,
that? So like, it seems like so influential to like Blade Runner or like The Fifth Element or even like Ghost in the Shell. Anything with this type of future architecture. It's just like that. I don't know if this set the the vision of the future as being this ultra urbanized, like centralized thing, like an urban dystopia. Um, but yeah,
um,
we don't. I think maybe it's just a limitation of the time where the miniatures are really awesome, but they don't necessarily feel like lived in. You know what I mean? Like we don't really see what the daily life is for people in like the rich part of the world. You know what I mean? But still, the movie's it's a very grand scale. It's not necessarily going for like, oh, what's their everyday life, and that's fine.
yeah,
That's not really a criticism. It's just kind of a factor of what the movie's interested in.
yeah. Um, Before we jump too much further, really quickly, the ratings for this one. Of course, this movie today is very well received. It's widely considered like one of the best movies of all time, one of the most influential of the period, of like silent movies and German expressionism. It's got 97% of Rotten Tomatoes, 92% audience score, 8.3 out of 10 on IMDb, 4.3 out of 5 on Letterboxd, average of 8.95 with this metric system, which is now indeed the highest rated movie we've covered, at like a very impressive average rating.
Yeah,
Just barely under the 9 out of 10 average rating. That's kind of crazy.
yeah. I mean that makes sense, and I feel like, well, first, I mean a lot of people watched the shorter version of this movie, which might be a
That's
factor,
true.
but also, I think this movie being long and like incredibly old and silent is that it sort of weeds out a lot of audience members that might not like it. So the people who are going to watch this are people who are probably more inclined to like it. Um, but obviously, it is a really well made movie. It's a great movie. It's classic, and a lot of it still holds up. Like we said, the scope, the miniatures, and the use of extras. There's hundreds of extras in a lot of these scenes. It's very impressive.
Yeah, it was very impressive. The whole flooding scene, or whole flooding like sequence with like the number of even like the number of kids, like lots of kids.
Yeah.
Like kind of scary that you're able to get so many kids to work on the set for that long, but I
Yeah.
mean, it works. It's impressive.
Yeah. I don't know all the like things about the economy in like the Weimar Republic, but I guess it was filmed in 1925 and 1926. So I don't know if the economy was doing very great back then. So they were
Hmm.
probably able to get a lot of people to just be extras for
Yeah,
pretty minimal pay, maybe. Um,
I'm
But
gonna go
it
on
has
a
also
limb.
this movie was also extremely expensive for the time.
Yeah,
I think it cost like 5 million like German marks at the time, which I don't know, adjusted for inflation, I have no idea how much that is, but it's like a lot of money, especially
yeah,
at the time.
yeah. And especially like you were saying at the time, like this is a time when like I mean, this is a huge budget movie for the time. Like not even thinking about like money, like just in general for the time, but when you just think about money for film at the time, it's not like there was all this many huge budget movies. So it's impressive that they were even able to use that much money.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, one thing that I really loved about the movie, it was probably my favorite parts of the movie, were like some of the creative editing and the superimposition, like these
Yeah,
shots of like all the people's eyes and all of those elements on top. Also, the scale and the miniatures and all that kind of stuff was also amazing. But those creative uses of like editing and superimposition and stuff like that, those were my favorite parts. And also some of the creative use of the intertitles where
yeah,
sometimes they'd be like the words would form a pyramid or there'd be like interesting design on the intertitles. It only happened a few times, but those were really cool creative aspects of the movie that were really like pushing the form of like silent filmmaking forward, I think. Um, and I also feel like this movie, it's not my favorite silent film, but like maybe my favorites being like Passion of Joan of Arc and Man with a Movie Camera. And I feel like those movies are almost entirely those aspects of like of filmmaking and they don't use like uh the sort of over the top aspect of uh, silent film acting, which really it kind of it did hurt this movie for me. The lead actor, um, which I have his name written down here. I should be able to find it, but Gustav Frolik, who plays
yeah,
Fredersen, he like his performance is very ridiculous, to be honest. Like he is the biggest drama queen I've ever seen. He's like practically fainting. He's I don't know, and it did take me out of the movie. Um, but so those were kind of my least favorite parts of the movie. But I did love how creative a lot of the filmmaking was
yeah.
throughout.
I think that makes sense, and that totally resonates with me. I will say, I think Brigitte Helm,
Yeah.
who plays both, is it Maria
Yep.
and also the robot
Yeah. The Machine Man.
Machine Man. I think she did a really good job. I was pretty impressed. I think like even her first scenes when she's like bringing the kids in to the overworld or whatever you want to call it, right? And showing them like how the rich people live. They like she's like doing like subtle expressions with her face that still tells you how she's feeling and like the way that she's trying to like be uh kind of intrusive and assertive to like showing the kids this stuff, right? Um, but it's not over the top, and it almost feels like she's acting in a modern movie. She's just not talking. um, a
Yeah.
lot of times, at least. I think there's maybe a couple times where she goes a little uh, over the top, like kind of what was traditional for the time, maybe. But I think that for the most part, I really enjoyed hers.
I think when she's playing Maria, she is a lot more subtle, and I like that. But I think when she's playing the Machine Man, especially toward the end, it does get very ridiculous. And she is supposed to be playing like a robot. I don't know; they don't get into the details of how this works or anything like that. But like, she's kind of just a like a raving madman, almost like Knock in Nosferatu. Like she's completely psychotic. Her eyes are darting all over the place. She's like, oh, like she just seems completely insane. She like so and that is definitely those were very heightened style of acting. But I think she's I think she was just trying to make clear the difference between Maria and the Machine Man, which did work. It was always clear who was who pretty much.
Mhm.
And a lot of that was because of her acting and the makeup too was like slightly different, I think. Um, but but yeah, her performance definitely gets big in some scenes.
I agree, but I do think that I think it helps actually. I think that because she's doing the two roles, I think it's okay for her to have the a role where she's a little bit more over the top and one where she's much more subtle. Um, I think she does much better with that than perhaps like uh, uh, yeah, the main character. I think the main character was quite a bit more over the top than really anything in Nosferatu.
Yeah. Oh my god, like he's like he'll have a discussion just literally talking to a guy and he's like hanging on. He's like, "Oh my god, I can think. Oh my god." He's like they're practically hugging the entire time they're talking. I'm like it was kind of silly.
Yeah,
And also like I think his acting always being at a 10 on the drama scale, like he's always at a 9 or a 10. And so it makes the tone of the movie always dramatic. Everything is always this big drama. And over 2 hours and 2 hours, 28 minutes, like it definitely wore on me in the middle. Like, so basically the first hour is a prelude. That's what it's called. And then there's the intermezzo. And then there's the climax. I forget what it's called exactly. I forget what they call it. Oh, the Furioso, which is pretty
uh,
badass. The Furioso. But the during the second act of this, I think it does drag a lot, and part of that is I think the tone is always high, so it's tiring. You know what I mean? Like if you're expected to go along on this ride with these characters, like having every scene be acted at a 10 uh, was just a little too much for me.
yeah, I can definitely see that. And I agree. I mean, uh, this movie, I think my definitely my least favorite part about this movie, the part I liked the least was it has to be the length. This movie feels long. You know, I do like my 90-minute movies. I mean, like Nosferatu is a great length, but I do also. I mean, like I can live with a good long movie. Like um, uh, there are plenty of examples of 2.5 hour movies that I think are perfect movies, right? Um, but they don't get that period in the middle. I think a big distinguisher for me is that it's when they don't get that period in the middle where you do have to just follow along because you want to get to the Furioso in this part, right? Or the Furiosa.
Yeah,
But yeah, this one I definitely felt it quite a bit. And that was a bummer for me, to be honest. I think also I think I had pretty high expectations. So when I started feeling that, I was kind of like, oh, and it was even more of a letdown, maybe just because my expectations for this movie were, of course, pretty high. Which I'm not saying it didn't live up to many expectations, but I think that the fact that it started dragging a little bit made me put even a worse taste in my mouth, maybe because I was expecting it not to.
yeah, I get that. It's tough. It's tough when you're watching such a classic, and you have those high expectations. Like it has our highest average rating,
Yeah.
So I get that. Also, I was
Yeah.
thinking perhaps the occult thing you were thinking of is the seven deadly sins
Oh
aspect.
yes, with the Grim
There,
Reaper and
yeah, that is sort of a weird, I guess, occult, or I don't know if that was just metaphorical or,
that
yeah,
was in his like was that in his dream or hallucination or something?
I maybe, yeah,
Something
probably,
weird. Yeah.
yeah. I think it's maybe metaphorical. There is a lot of interesting themes in the movie though. Like there is, I really liked this whole the way they showed the Tower of Babel
That,
sequence.
oh my god. My favorite
Really
sequence
cool.
maybe. That was really cool.
Yeah, so Maria is preaching basically to her followers, and she is very like peaceful, sort of the positive side of religion, I guess, at the beginning of the movie. And she's telling them about the Tower of Babel, and we see the story presented in the film instead of just like reading the intertitles, and it's really really well done, and it does sort of go to the themes throughout the movie of people sort of being unable to work together, I guess, is sort of the theme there. But yeah,
Yeah.
I thought that was great.
And I think classism maybe was there too, right? With the workers versus the elite.
Yeah, definitely.
And I thought also, like, just to go along with that, another part that was one of my favorites in the movie was just the sheer diversity in set design. It was impressive that, like, the Tower of Babel was its own thing, and also the catacombs and the church down there, and even the room with the seven deadly sins. And when the main character first goes down to the worker area, and he sees them all working, and then it turns into the Mayan. He like hallucinates probably or whatever, the excuse me, the Mayan temple, before it like explodes or whatever, or as it's exploding. And then there's also like things like the office, right? And you get the outside shots of the flying or the probably planes or whatever, right? And the massive buildings. It was just so impressive that the world here felt so built up, because they were able to show you so many different parts of it, right? Which of course goes into just how much they spent on the movie, but it was just really impressive.
Yeah, definitely. And there's that whole it's not a big part of the movie, but there's like that garden at the beginning,
Yeah.
where I guess like Freder like does sports and stuff like that, which I think also that may have been that garden may have been like a thing the Nazis liked almost, of like an idealized version of like, oh, Germany in as ideal.
Mhm.
Um and also maybe they just kind of liked that, like, people considered like this is such a great, just a great work that's German, right? Like
Yeah.
even regardless of whether the movie itself would agree with that ideology. But yes, I
That's
agree. The design is fantastic throughout.
Yeah, and the use of miniatures and the sets. And I was actually so you brought up the miniatures and how they like did that like superimposition of characters at times with the miniatures, and that was so impressive to me. And it turns out this is actually like a thing now, or it was not anymore because now green screens and whatnot. But the I don't remember if he was the director of like art design or the cinematographer, but or special effects maybe, Eugen Schuften, uh, and he developed this thing during this movie called the Schuften process, which uses mirrors to actually like in live time superimpose an actor into a miniature set or something. Um,
Oh.
and I was trying to look up like the Wikipedia of how that works, and I don't know enough about how that works to really talk about it, but it seemed really cool, and it seemed like it worked really well for me in the movie of like how they did that, where you had that little almost like a little doorway kind of where the character would appear in the whole set. And apparently that was because of the way the mirrors worked, and it was really cool to read about. uh, and I guess I encourage people maybe to go and look at how that's done, because I can't speak on really how it's done, but it seems really cool, and it seems like it was really influential for a while until we got better technology to do things. But
Yeah. And I mean the shots, like the wide shots of the city with people walking like down, like all like those are completely believable, really. Like it doesn't look silly or anything. Like it aged like really, really well. So it's very impressive at the time that they were able to achieve so much technically.
yeah, does this movie look better than the Star Wars prequels?
Yes,
It does, right? Like you
I
see
think
the huge
so.
city, and there's like those scenes. There's that scene in one of them where Anakin like uh, jumps off of this stupid speeder or something, and they're flying in the sky, and then like Obi-Wan has to chase him, or I don't know. It's so dumb, but um, they're chasing that bounty hunter or whatever. Not like this matters, but and you see this massive city and all the cars and everything's flying. And watching this movie, I couldn't help but compare it, because like I think that the idea of that massive city, at least down its lineage, was probably inspired by something that was inspired by this, if not this itself. Um, but this just looks better than those movies. This is like
Yeah.
100 years before, almost 80 years before or something, and it just looks so much better.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean that is a tough comparison. Those, I mean, especially Attack of the Clones, like that's just a bad movie. But but yeah.
Yeah, is this movie better than Attack of the Clones?
Yeah. Is this movie
Post your
better
votes
than
now.
trash? And sorry, George. You know what? I don't feel bad because you know what? He fucked up the original trilogy, and we still can't
Yeah.
see the original versions. So
Yep.
fuck that.
Yeah, that movie was on during like some of our Christmas stuff, and not I don't want to go on too much of a side note, but it was at the Jabba the Hutt scene when there's all the music and the dancing, and then you see the
Oh,
stupid CGI stuff come in, and I can't help but get so infuriated when that happens.
in
But those movies were incredible, like uh, they were like masterpieces. Like you made something amazing, and yet you can't help but go back and ruin it. Like and I know that he doesn't think he's ruining it, and that's cool. But also, let us watch it the way that you made it originally, too. You know, like this is
yeah,
the whole thing
exactly.
with like lost footage, right? Like, um, actually, both of these movies that we went over have like this kind of lost media allure to them, and I think even The General had some of that. Like, I think just movies in this time period, it maybe wasn't as like traditional, maybe to preserve them. I don't really know, but
Yeah, people didn't really think it was as important, or also like things deteriorate over time. Like film, movies would play for like months and months, or even years in theaters, and they would kind of just pass around the same reels. So eventually they get worn out and turn into shitty. You know what I mean? Over time. So yeah, it
yeah,
was just harder to store things. But yeah, I mean, with the Star Wars things, it's like it wouldn't be so annoying and almost infuriating if the original versions were just available. I'm not even a big Star Wars fan, but I'm
yeah,
like, at least let us watch the original versions, have the option of either one. Then I would
yeah.
actually have no problem with it at all. I'd be like, go
Same.
ahead, change as much as you want. You can make a different version, but just make the original versions available.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it's crazy that I mean, in like 100 years or something, maybe there'll be like the restored original cuts of Star Wars: A New Hope and whatnot. But
I hope
uh,
so.
I hope so too. But I hope it happens before 100 years. I'll tell you what.
My theory has been that 2027, 50 years from the original, the Disney should release a box set with the original versions. How I don't know what's in the contract. Maybe George didn't allow it when he got his $4 billion, but maybe then or maybe after George Lucas dies, which hopefully will not be soon. I wish him the best. Hopefully that does not happen soon.
Of
But
course.
maybe that is I don't even know. I mean, who knows? But anyway,
Anyways, sidetrack. I mean, it's clear that this movie Metropolis influences so much. We're
oh
even
yeah,
talking about Star Wars now. Um, but I mean,
one.
yeah.
No, what were you gonna say?
I was gonna say, I mean, it really just it's impressive when you just think about the like lineage. Like you could track back. I mean, really, probably any science fiction movies made after this, you can track back their lineage, at least in some respects, to this. And really, I don't know if there was really any, at least any like well established feature length science fiction movies before this. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there was the George Méliès like short films kind of a thing, but yeah, this is definitely one of the earliest for sure. Gotta be.
Yeah, which is just impressive. I mean, in a similar note to Nosferatu being like one of the original monster movies, both of these movies, it's very impressive how uh, they kind of they're just I guess the first to do these things, and then these things obviously take off. But,
Well, yeah, and I think one of the craziest things in this movie, this is a 97 year, almost it's going to be 98 years old, and technically, I mean, they started filming like 100 years ago, pretty much,
yeah,
and this movie has a video call in it.
that's
Toward
right.
the end, on the machine,
That's
the
right.
guy whose name I forget, he like runs the machine. Uh, he Grot. He calls uh, Joe Frederson on a video call. It's completely insane that was even like something that they thought of.
That's so funny because like there's parts of this movie, and I think the ending particularly, that feel very modern in a way. That when that happens in the movie, it actually like I didn't bat an eye. I was just like, yeah, that happens in science fiction movies. And then it's like, wait a second. Yeah, that's crazy.
They didn't even have television at the
Yeah,
time. They like phones were still so rudimentary. Like how just to even think of that was pretty genius. Um,
yeah.
Yeah. And
Wow, that's a good catch. I don't know how I like it didn't click with me necessarily that that was so impressive at the time, but of course it is. Yeah.
yeah, no, but well, now it's just something we take for granted almost because it's just normal. But yeah, that was something I wanted to bring up. Um, yeah, one other thing I wanted to say about this movie, I don't know if it's intentional or not, but the story does seem to have like perhaps been influenced by like the Buddha and like the Bhagavad Gita because the story of the Buddha is basically he's a prince that has never seen suffering. He's grown up in a life of luxury, and he always has food, he always has entertainment, and all this stuff. And then when he's like, I think he's 18 or whatever, he grows up. He's a teenager or whatever, and he leaves the palace for the first time, and he sees well, he sees three things in particular. I forget exactly what they are, but it's like he sees someone who's sick and dying, and he sees people who are starving, and some other stuff. And he sees suffering for the first time, and it like shakes him to his core, and he's like, "Oh my God, how are people living like this?" And that's part kind of becomes why he becomes the Buddha, and he teaches people to try to inflict as little suffering as possible to avoid causing suffering, basically. That's obviously, I'm not an expert, that's kind of a simplified version, but this story has a lot of similarities where Freder is basically effectively a prince, and he sees the horrible conditions of the working class in the city, and he wants to basically help them and save them from all this suffering. So I have no idea if that is like an intentional thing, like connection, or if it's just sort of like one of those things in human storytelling that sort of transcends cultures and just has those parallels. But it was something I wanted to bring up regarding the film.
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know a whole lot about that, but it sounds like that seems like a pretty good interpretation of like if you said just that, right? That sounds like this movie in a way, right? Like the prince sees suffering and tries to change it,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, and it has the Tower of Babel and like that type of a biblical connection as well. So,
Yeah.
I mean, this movie has a lot of ideas on its mind, and I think it is kind of, uh, I mean, in terms of scope and scale and filmmaking, it's very complicated for its time, but also in terms of like ideas and themes, it's interested in a lot of big themes, more than most movies at the time or most movies today, really.
Yeah. And there's so much that again just transcends this film, right? Like there's even the prophesized savior, right? And that is in like like Dune, right? Like Star Wars, right? Like this is in like every science fiction thing today, right? When we it's funny actually, I thinking about this movie for the longest time, for some reason I thought this was like a spacey movie. I thought like the robot was like I don't know, I guess what I thought, but I thought there was like more space stuff in this movie, right? Because it's so futuristic. Um, that I just assumed, I guess. But
Yeah.
it's interesting also because it just influences so much of those space movies that there are, right? Like the stuff that happens in this movie, the themes, the way the characters play out, the scope of everything, it all just influences like 2001, right? Like Dune, it influences Star Wars, it influences all of these space themed sci-fi as well as other sci-fi stuff. But to such an extent where like me not knowing much about the movie going into it was like, oh, this will be a cool space movie, you know? And it's like actually it's not. It just like kind of created the realm for those movies to take place also, which is
Yeah,
really
definitely. And I think it's very influential to Blade Runner,
yeah.
obviously. And I think one thing this movie, which I'm not blaming them, it's not a uh, problem with the movie, but it doesn't really take into account automation,
Mhm.
which is such a big factor of just modern life and going to be such a big thing in the future. And in Blade Runner, obviously, there are the replicants, and they're sort of used as slaves on off-planet colonies and stuff like that. And in this movie, like not having automation is kind of the whole reason that these um the working class has such horrible living conditions. They have to when they work these awful hours. But also like at the time, that was life in like industrialization, like people working 10-hour days in factories and like being worked to the bone, and you know what I mean, like that was all just a normal part of life. So yeah, so the lack of automation, I think, is kind of just representative of the time of of this is really what life was like for a lot of people, actually, just in the Industrial Revolution, which really only happened within the past, what, 50 years of the movie coming out. You
Yeah.
know, so that is kind of, I think, industrialization and the effect it had on poor people in the working class, and the really horrible working conditions in a lot of, you know, factories and stuff like that. That must have been a huge influence on the movie.
Yeah, definitely. In the same way that like the era of automation has had a huge influence on how those stories are told today, right?
Yeah,
More
definitely.
recently, at least. But
Yeah, it totally changed the way people look at those kind of things.
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, those are most of the things I wanted to talk about. Uh,
The only other thing that I had like to bring up really quickly is just that yeah, the so this is the 2 hour and 28 2 hour 28 minute version that we both watched, which is about 20 minutes longer than like the traditional one. Uh, not like original one, but then the one that's been kind of circulated for a long time. And apparently that's because it was America that made these, like the American getting released in America is when it got those edits to get it cut down to closer to the 2 hour length. And apparently, uh, Fritz Lang actually hated the fact that it was edited so much and refused to watch it. The like the Western version of it, which of course became like the only one, like the definitive way to watch it for a long time. Uh, and it's great, and it's like really cool that it's that we're back and we're able to watch the definitive version now, like the one that maybe Fritz Lang wouldn't have hated and did like, but yeah, just going back to like kind of the things I didn't like about the movie is definitely the length, right? Like I think you're right about like the scenes, and it's fun because in this, the way that we watched it, you can totally see the scenes they originally cut out. So you actually get like the insight of why maybe they made those choices. And like I don't necessarily actually think it was bad choices to cut out. Like I get like making it so you can see it the way that the director intended, of course, but I do wonder what my opinion would have been on this movie if I had seen the truncated version.
yeah, true. I agree. I totally agree. Um, so yeah, one other interesting thing about this movie, one of the set decorators, which obviously we talked about how the set design is so amazing, is
Yeah.
Edgar G. Ulmer, who worked on some other Fritz Lang films, like Die Nibelungen, which came out a few years before this, and he also worked on The Golem, which was the
Oh,
other, yeah, which we talked about earlier. And he
oh,
became a director in Hollywood. He directed The Black Cat, The Man from Planet X, and Detour,
oh,
the film noir. Yeah, so he did a lot of genre like filmmaking in the 30s, really through the 50s, maybe into the 60s. I don't know. Yeah, but but yeah, it was just kind of cool, the sort of legacy of this movie. Like he was a set decorator on this, and he ended up becoming a pretty well known director. Um,
yeah, that's pretty cool. Getting your start. I mean, getting your start as a set decorator on Metropolis probably is not the worst thing to put on your resume, you know?
yeah. He worked with Fritz Lang like once or twice before this too, so this was kind of probably a, a culmination of a lot of like collaboration with them and stuff. But yeah, I mean, maybe some of the most iconic set design of all time.
Oh my gosh.
Got to be.
Yeah. I mean, again, that diversity in the set design too, just how much different stuff we get to see in this, right? It just makes the world feel so real in the way that, like you mentioned with the miniatures at the time, they don't feel as lived in maybe as like miniatures in uh, more modern films, but the way they have so many different sets, I think uh, at least helps mitigate some of that, right? Where it does feel lived in because you get to see so much different space.
Yeah, definitely. and it shows the class divide very well and all that kind of stuff. But
Definitely.
one last thing I wanted to do, maybe before our ratings, or maybe we should do our ratings first. But let's do our ratings. Um, I gave it a 3.5 out of 5, which I know is low, but the runtime wore on me. I appreciated it, and I really enjoyed parts of it, but there were also parts where I was like, damn, man, get this drama queen off the screen and keep going with the cool sets and stuff.
Yeah, I think so. I was between 3.5 and 4, but I did end up with 4 on this one, because as much as it wore off on me, I don't. It's so influential, and the sets are so cool, and the movie as a whole is pretty awesome. But I can't help but wonder about that truncated version. But
Yeah. I would also I believe the Blu-ray just has the full restored version, but I do kind of wish that it had both versions just to compare.
yeah,
Because if I rewatched it, I'm like, I'd probably just watch the truncated version, to be honest.
yeah,
But
yeah. I mean, for me, like honestly, I think it'd be hard to watch the full length version. Well, I don't know if I would say it'd be hard to watch again because the movie is pretty awesome, but it is long and you definitely feel it. Like, yeah, if I was going to seek it out to watch again, I would probably want to watch the truncated version, and then you can compare it yourself and like have different thoughts on it. But that's kind of funny. So for both these movies, I went with 4 stars, and you went with 3.5 for both.
Yep.
There we go.
There you go. So Ryan, silent film Ryan over there. Jeez. So real quick, I thought this might be kind of fun to do. I have on our Letterboxd. You search "Mind Your Movies," all one word on Letterboxd. We should pop up. And I have a little list on our account that is recommendations, and I recommended a movie that we haven't talked about on the podcast to go with each movie that we've talked about on the podcast. And I figured I'd mention what I chose for these movies. So for Nosferatu, I chose A Page of Madness, the 1926 Japanese horror movie. It's a really cool depiction of madness. It's set at like a in a mental asylum, and there's some really cool filmmaking and editing in it. And it's just a very cool, influential horror movie, silent horror movie. That's a little less well known than Nosferatu. And then for Metropolis, obviously there are a million options I could go with. And like M by Fritz Lang is a masterpiece. I love that movie. And obviously Blade Runner is my favorite movie, so that also could be a recommendation. But I went with Man with a Movie Camera, the 1929 Dziga Vertov movie, my favorite silent film. Just brilliant. Like I mentioned, those scenes of experimental editing and cinematography and stuff. This movie kind of is that whole thing. It's very obviously it's kind of like influenced by Eisenstein and that Soviet montage filmmaking. And I think this is like the sort of the great culmination of silent filmmaking. And so yeah, those were my recommendations a bit based on these. So there you go.
Awesome. Thanks, Shane. Those are cool.
Yeah, no problem. And hey, if anyone else wants to see what I had for the previous episodes, go and look at the list on Letterboxd and you'll see.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, there's a list of, I mean, we've covered a lot of movies now. So there's a list of, it looks like 23 films, one for each one of our films that we've done so far. And these look awesome. I'm going through it right now. I see Videodrome for I Saw the TV Glow. Ed Wood for Beetlejuice. I mean, y'all have got to go check this out and watch some of these and let us know.
Yeah. Yeah. Some of them I did kind of just go like, what's another good movie by the director? Because it was like Ed Wood is like, I don't know that it's that related to Beetlejuice, but it's a really good Tim Burton movie. So like watch it. But better than Beetlejuice, I'll tell you that much. But yeah, I enjoyed doing this, and I haven't seen the Eggers Nosferatu yet, so that'll be the next addition to the recommendations list.
That's right. Speaking of those lists, by the way, we've got a few lists on there right now. We've got, if anyone's interested in found footage film, I'll plug myself here. We do have a found footage recommendation list where I have some in order of when they've come out, kind of like a guided tour of some found footage movies throughout history, and kind of you can see how it's changed maybe from things as early as like Ghost Watch and Without Warning that are a little bit before Blair Witch, all the way up to things today like Host and Late Night with the Devil. So check those out too.
Yeah, definitely. That is very cool because I think found footage is a genre that has sort of been watered down and like they're now from like maybe the mid 2000s until now that there's just hundreds of kind of cheap, not great found footage movies. So to have
Yeah.
a nice list of influential and interesting found footage movies is very helpful, I think.
Yeah, there's a lot of junk out there. So let me watch the junk for you and I'll tell you what to watch.
Yeah, sort out the good ones. But yeah, so I guess that's that for our episode. The final thing we have to do is choose our topic for our next episode. So I
That's
have
it.
the obviously we're over Zoom, but I have
Yeah.
the
I'm
little
gonna reach my
magical.
arm in and I'm gonna shuffle it around.
There you go. Shuffle it,
Yep.
shuffle it.
All
So
right.
yeah, next episode we're doing Robert Eggers' Nosferatu. Get out there and see it. I'm seeing it on Tuesday. I'm very excited.
And I actually got to see it luckily on Christmas Day. So
Yeah.
I'm a little bit ahead, but we're gonna see what our thoughts are next week on that one.
All right.
And here we go. For the week after,
The next topic is drum roll, please. Set on a college.
set on a college. Interesting.
Set on a college campus. Set in college, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Okay,
Well,
interesting. So
that's
we did movies set on trains a
yeah.
couple weeks ago. Now we'll be doing movies set in college. Um, little backstory: both of us went to college,
That's that's
so there you
right.
go. We have personal experience.
And both of us went to college in Massachusetts, which is uh uh maybe makes our college experience different than if you went somewhere else. Potentially, I don't really know. We only went here, so
Yeah, right.
I don't
Well,
know.
I mean, Massachusetts is probably one of the biggest like states for universities and colleges. I imagine,
Yeah.
especially relative to size. Like per capita, maybe we have the most colleges and universities. Also, Harvard's here. Not that we went to Harvard, but
Yeah.
well, I don't know. Like off the top of my head, I don't necessarily think of anything right away that I'm like, oh, that's a great movie set in a college.
I can think of, I mean, like Goodwill Hunting.
Oh yeah.
What's the Facebook one, The Social Network?
Oh yeah.
Those are good movies. Both also actually, ironically, take place in Massachusetts. Those could have been if everyone's watching our reels, you'll notice that we did a Massachusetts movie draft, and actually we had someone mentioned Goodwill Hunting on there. Good call out to one that we neither one of us picked for that draft. So if you're not watching those yet, make sure that you jump over to our Instagram and our YouTube channel to watch those. The links to all that stuff is, of course, on our Letterboxd.
Yeah. Yeah. We've been doing some reels. They're pretty fun. I enjoy doing them. But yeah, I'm trying to look for some college movies, and I guess it makes sense. A lot of these movies are like party comedies. That's like all that's popping up. It's
Yeah.
basically like The Social Network and then like a bunch of party movies.
Yeah.
Which I guess makes a lot of sense.
There's also, I mean, there's things like there's got to be like horror movies. There's one like what is it? Krista, I think, is like a Christie maybe is a like a everyone goes away for Thanksgiving break or something, but then some girl gets stalked on a campus or something. So there's some horror stuff in there too. But,
Yeah, also Black Christmas, which we just talked about.
that's
That
right.
would be set in college.
Yeah.
I guess one here would be Everybody Wants Some. Also, that is set in a college.
Yeah. There's also things like Pitch Perfect, or the other end of the spectrum. We've got things like Monsters University.
That Monsters University. That is an option. That is an option. Well, there's The Graduate, but that's literally after he's graduated. He goes back to a college to stalk a girl. Does that count?
Yes.
There's obviously Animal House and those type of kind of comedies.
There's like A Beautiful Mind.
Oh yeah. I haven't seen A Beautiful Mind in a long time, but I remember not liking it that much.
Apparently Flubber might be set on a campus.
I mean, this is kind of
There's a bigger diversity of movies than maybe I expected. Oh, Terms of Endearment. Interesting.
so there is like college campus horror that is like
Yeah.
seems to be a subgenre. There's Scream 2. is set in a
That was
college.
honestly the first thing I thought of, but I don't know.
It's tough to do Scream 2 and not Scream 1.
Yeah.
Right.
Although everyone's seen Scream 1, right? I mean, come on, guys.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. We could do, it could be fun. I feel like in our mini episodes, it could be fun to do a series at some point, and we could do like all the Scream movies and do them each,
Yeah,
you know,
that'd be cool.
every mini episode is Scream 1 through 6, I guess. Maybe we start with a trilogy instead of doing 6 in a row.
Yeah, or maybe like as it's coming out, like when Scream 7 gets announced, we can try to make but we could even do like 2 at a time or something. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. We could. And we were also talking about doing that with 28 years later coming out
Yeah.
soon.
Oh yeah.
So that could be cool. It's tough that we just did Black Christmas because I think
I
Black Christmas
know.
would have been like a perfect choice for this. There's a horror movie called Final Exam. Kind of a cool title. I've never seen it, but we could do Hoosiers, which I've never seen because I just realized college sports.
Interesting.
Or Blue Chips.
Have you heard of Cat Person?
What? Cat Person?
Cat Person?
I've never heard of that.
It's a movie from last year. It's on Hulu, and it's about a college student who works at a movie theater and goes on a date with an old person that she thinks might be a killer. Weird.
Cat Person. Let me see.
I was trying to figure out if it was actually like set on campus or not. But
2023. Interesting. I have never seen it, never heard of it. Let me look. I mean, you did say you wanted to do that Christie movie.
well, I'm getting options to go with the vibe just in case.
I think I'm going to do Blue Chips. It's a 1994 movie directed by William Friedkin. I've never seen it, but it's about college basketball.
Okay.
And Shaquille O'Neal is in it.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So I've never seen it, and I have kind of always wanted to watch it, so that'll be a good reason to watch it.
Cool.
All right. Once I figured out the college sports angle, I think
Yeah.
I don't even know how much of that is set in college because part of it is about the coach recruiting like high school students, and like I think he pays them, like, which obviously was you're not allowed to do at the time. You can't pay the student athletes or whatever, but schools do so they can get the best players. Let me see if it's streaming. Oh, it says it's on Amazon Prime.
Well, you know what? I ended up finding this movie Cat Person, and I don't know how much of it's actually at campus, but it's about a college student, and the Wikipedia mentions her roommate a lot. So I'm going to say there's a good amount of campus stuff.
Let's see. Oh wow, that's a funny review. Funny basketball related review on this movie.
On Blue Chip?
No, on Cat Person.
Oh, really?
The top review is David Sims from the Blank Check podcast. There hasn't been a third act collapse this bad since Clippers Rockets 2015, which is a game like the Clippers were winning by a bunch, and the Rockets sat all their players, and they came back, and it was like a crazy comeback, like crazy Clippers failure.
Oh, dang.
But yeah, I'm down to do this movie. I mean, I've never heard of it. I have no idea what it is. I'm down to do two blind. This might be the first time we've done 2 movies neither of us has seen.
Yeah.
Well, and it'll be 2 very different portrayals of college.
Yeah. Yeah. And 2 like different genres, different vibes maybe. That could be interesting.
I'm down for that if you're down for Cat Person. I'm also down if you want to do fucking House on Sorority Row or something like that. Or, I mean, up to you. Whatever you want to do. All right, we're back. We did a little research because it was difficult to find movies set in a college campus. Some of them are partially set in a college campus, so we don't even know. And we both chose 2 movies we've never seen before. So I decided to go with Blue Chips, 1994 movie directed by William Friedkin, starring Shaquille O'Neal. It's about college basketball. and I've never seen it, so who knows how much of it is on in the college, but it was something I've been wanting to watch for a while, so happy to choose that one. And it should be streaming on Amazon Prime in the US if anyone wants to watch.
Excellent. And I did a similar route of picking one that I haven't seen, and I haven't actually heard a whole lot about. But in my research here, instead of going with something like Good Will Hunting or The Social Network, which are things I've seen, I decided to go with a movie called Cat Person from 2023, directed by Susanna Fogel. No idea if it will be
not a cat person. Come on. Just kidding. Go to the YouTube to see the shirt I'm wearing.
That's right. No idea how much of this is on campus, but the tagline mentions that it's a college student, and the Wikipedia, I'm not reading too much on it, but the first paragraph on the Wikipedia talks about her roommate. So I'm assuming there's a good amount of college stuff here. There we go. Cat person? Cat people? Hold on.
Cat person. Cat people, I think, is a different movie, right?
Yes. Cat person. 2023.
Yeah. All right. So there it is. If you want to watch along with us, watch Blue Chips and Cat Person. Cat Person's on Hulu. Did you say that?
Yes, good call. Cat Person. It looks like it's streaming on Hulu in the US. So.
Cool. All right. So come along with us on our ride. Next week, Robert Eggers' Nosferatu. I've said that several times, but just a reminder. And then Blue Chips and Cat Person. Jesus Christ. For episode 9, I believe.
Yes, which makes that episode title going to be, it could be Blue People or Cat Chips.
Cat Chips.
or Blue People. Or
Blue Cherson.
Oh yeah, wait, not people.
Blue Chat Person.
Blue Chat.
I think Blue Person's pretty funny.
Blue Person it is. That's going to be episode number 9? Is that going to be 9?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, episode 9.
Episode 9.
I like Blue Person.
Blue Person.
Episode 9, Blue Person. Hell yeah.
All right, y'all. We'll see you for the next one.
Oh, wait. Did we say the name of this episode?
Oh, Nosferatu.
Nosferatu. Did we even say that?
I think we said it at the beginning.
Yeah, we probably did. It was so long ago, I don't remember.
If not, I'm sure the editor will put it in there.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.